Let me tell you a joke. Can I tell you a joke before we get started? So people, they stick around for the dad joke later. I'm going to give you the good one. Eric's going to love it. You pay attention? You got to answer the question, man. What's the difference between... So by the time you're age 60, like what should you accomplish? And a lot of people do the dollar amounts. That's fine. Maybe you want to hit a certain threshold by 60. That actually makes it really easy for us to sort of, map that out. Anyways, so that could be something. But today we're going to go through like sort of those check boxes, the things you want to know, get a little geeky here, and work through it. Are you ready, Eric?
Yeah, and then we've got a couple questions at the end, like we did last show too. Where
I don't actually know these questions.
They're in Slack that we just got from Cody, but you know answers, and we can walk through them.
Okay. Well, genuinely,
or if you don't, I will.
I don't actually know the questions. I didn't look.
Let's
get started, shall we?
How many topics are we hitting?
All of them.
How many?
We're going to hit 5.
Oh, okay. So not 4?
5.
So you got to show one hand, not the other.
Boy, man, he came swinging today, man.
Well, I wasn't ready, and you just jumped in on this.
Life, you got to be ready.
Yeah.
Right? You got to always be ready. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is a really simple one. Let's knock this one out. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be complicated. I'm talking about knowing that number you're shooting for. Whether you're 25, 55, it doesn't matter. We got to know that you're saving enough and you're going to hit the goals that you want to hit there. So here's what we're going to do. We're going over to our planner. We're going to make this real basic and simple. This is our planner inside the dojo. And we're just working it out, just figuring out a basic plan here. So in this case, Louis, Mr. Armstrong, is 26 years old up at the top. He's going to retire at 65, right? So we're just trying to figure out what the plan is. He figures he's going to live 20 years, got a little bit of money saved. He's only 26. He's got 28,000 saved, making 7%. We're assuming on returns. Decent job, good job, making 88,000. He's single. And we have basically his 401k match in here. He's getting 5%, saving a little money here with us in Jazz, probably in his Roth. And then now we have the retirement side. See how it's bucketized? Like you got, okay, give me some info. Tell me your savings. Let's look at retirement. So now we know, okay, let's say he wants to shoot for 50,000 a year. We'll assume lower returns, right? Not taking much risk there in retirement or less risk. Inflation we got baked in there, maybe some Social Security. I doubt a pension or anything, but just, we'll say Social Security. And we're just basically putting in these numbers to go, do you agree with that? Do you think you'll live to be 85? Do you currently make 88, right? Putting the numbers down. And what we find is, when we do this, he's got a slight surplus, right? So what's fun about it is if he goes, no, I want to have 55,000, we say, all right, well, we don't have to do this whole made up like big plan. We go, hey, for an extra $5,000 a year, buddy, you got to save more. You now have a severe surplus. How much do we got to save? We can either go 6% in your 401k. So he's at 5, we can go to 6. We could change your savings here from $1,200 to $2,059. So the point being that we're getting to that plan, right? So step number 1, know the number. Just figure out what that initial number is going to be, because then we kind of put that on autopilot, right?
Yeah, and most people don't want to retire with much less than what you already have. But where people mess up with that is they say, okay, well, I'm making $100,000 a year, but they're also putting $20,000 into their 401k. And so they're like, well, I want to make sure that I retire on at least $100,000. It's like, wait, you're only living on $80,000 now. There's things like that you want to think through when you're trying to develop that and knowing your number and factoring that in. And then we've got, so I just sent you a slide for this, but so you've got your current allocation. So really thinking through getting ready for the retirement years, you've got to start to think through, how you're going to want to invest. There's the talk of, there's the bucket strategy. And I've started to talk through, the buckets are great, but it gets really complex and confusing because it's like, okay, I'm going to have bucket 1 and that's going to be my short-term money. And I have bucket 2 and then bucket 3. But what happens when the market falls and you have to move bucket 3 to bucket 2? It's not as just clean and cut as you would think. I really think that we're going to start seeing, I've alluded to this recently, we're going to start to see a shift back to what was originally being talked about in 22 as dead, and that's like the 60-40 allocation, 60% stocks, 40% bonds. The reason for that is the Fed's starting to lower rates. As the Fed starts to lower rates in September, we're going to start to see the bond portfolios appreciate a bit more. People will start to take money out of money markets eventually because money markets aren't going to pay, and if they're not paying as much, where's the money going to go? We can either sit in just complete cash, or it's going to have to go somewhere, and that's where the bond market potentially is going to have some opportunity. And so looking at this, I was having a conversation with some clients just the other day on this specific scenario because they're getting into the retirement years and, the markets ran hot. And now we've got a point where they're in a position. It's not this one. It's the investment asset allocation one. Next one over there. There you go. And so the market's running hot. And where they're at, they don't need to take a significant amount of risk for their portfolio. So we can start to gear back a little bit. And it may be a little bit of money market funds right now that are paying 4 or 5%. It may be something where we start to build out the bonds. But if we're looking at just an 80-20 portfolio, your standard deviation from the line there, you could have a standard average pullback of 13.2%, versus 8.8%. Well, that's something that you really got to think through when you're in the retirement years, because if the market's down and you're down 13.2 on your portfolio, that's a lot more than 8.8, especially if you have $1 million. You're talking roughly 5%. That's $50,000.
So what you're showing there is on the left is what they currently have. All their accounts add up to essentially 80-20, which is on the column there, 47% equities, some international, et cetera. But in order to make the plan successful, they could take a lot less risk and essentially be 50-50, although so split between some different bonds and cash.
Yep.
So when you figure out, this is like the fun part for me, when you figure out, hey, I'm doing this, I've got all my accounts linked, and I didn't know I was essentially taking more risk than I need to, and this is the risk I can take and still make the plan successful. Okay, with the market at highs, that's the time to make the adjustment.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Sucks to be the guy that figures out during like COVID, oh man, I was taking too much risk. I now had that pullback when I should have only had that pullback or less. And now you're stuck.
Yep. Well, we talked about it last week. Somebody that's gearing for retirement has the growth portfolio and has really enjoyed the ride up. They're fine. But as soon as you retire, when you start to have to pull from that, there's some psychological switch that flips, and you're like, oh no, I can't take all this risk. So let's start having those conversations and really just getting that figured out. Even pre-retirement is not a bad option there to think through.
This is kind of the big one, and it's more of a timing thing because the market's essentially at highs. This is the time to get somebody to look at your whole portfolio, go through everything, and figure out. I mean, maybe you're 55, 45. I don't know. Maybe you're somewhere close. But in this case, that's a wide spread. So people Jazz Wealth, I'm just saying, you can go to the website, you give us a call, we're here. But this is the time to actually dig into that and go, ooh, I'm 1 or 2 years away from retiring. I don't know that I want that risk with all your money. I mean, you might split it up a little bit, but very cool.
And it's knowing what your plan can afford, because some people need the risk in order to make their plan work.
I've seen that.
So that's the opposite conversation there. So it just all depends on your scenario.
I have seen that. What takes you into the other part of it too, because what happens if some of those accounts are brokerage accounts, are inherited IRAs, right? And so there's the timing and the tax loss or potential tax gain of a lot of that. So it takes me to the third point here, which would be the tax planning side of it is wildly taken off actually in the tax world. The concept of somebody going, hey, I'm going to visit with you before we hit the end of the year and you got to do your taxes. That to me is like more beneficial than almost anything else we're going to talk about, because if you get somebody to help you with that, let's say it's us, I don't know. But if you do that, all of a sudden you're adding value by saving money on taxes. Well, if you just saved 2% on your effective tax rate or whatever you're planning to do, or maybe $2,000, $10,000, whatever, okay, that's money in your pocket. So the tax planning side is really interesting to me. And it could be as simple as like planning out future conversions. It could be as complex as like business strategies and things that you own, assets that are moving back and forth. But that part has to get done, in my opinion.
Yep. I that was the slide I sent you there, and showing that it's $1 million portfolio, all pre-tax. The guy's 64 years old, single individual. And it's like, well, should he do Roth conversions? Well, as you can see in the chart there, I mean, he's going to have $244,000 more if at the end of life, tax-adjusted dollars. And the fact is that, if you look at the line there, when you do the conversions, the idea with this is that it's actually going to reduce the RMDs he has later in life. So it's going to reduce his tax liability long term, because he doesn't need the money right this second. But even though he won't need it, maybe at 75 or 80, the government's going to come to his door, knock, knock. Hey, guess what? You haven't started pulling enough out. You're going to have to take even more. And he's going to have some things he needs to look at. Also, though, tax planning, I mean, qualified charitable distributions. If you're a charitable person, when you're hitting the RMD years, that's the opportunity there too. So if you haven't done the conversions, start thinking through that as well. That's an option for you.
Well, let's like dive into this a little bit. So imagine now you're 40 years old, maybe you're still watching. We're talking about the tips to hit by the time, or the goals and things to hit by the time you're 60. Well, if you have just a 401k, that's the example on the screen there. That dark blue line is saying you reached age 65 and 100% of your investments are in a 401k. All right, so you're going to withdraw from that. It's all pre-tax, so you have to pay some tax. So in the background, what he's showing is that light green line that then sort of fades into the background there. Well, that's if you were to start converting, filling up your tax bracket there, and then going along, filling it up until you can't anymore. How much more money would you have by paying the tax now versus later? So the younger crowd that's watching this doesn't really move the needle. You probably don't get what we're saying here, but those things, that's the little things that we're talking about is like, okay, let's plan for that. If we can plan for it now, ride the fun of the tax law changes and stuff, there's more money to be had by just simply changing when you pay the tax on the 401k.
No,
and also,
absolutely.
if you're 40 years old, don't just have a 401k, right? Maybe now's the time to start spreading that into a Roth or something.
Yep. Roths, brokerage accounts, different things there, potential opportunity. And then, coming up on 60 years old, then you've got to really start thinking through the insurance game. So all insurance, you're going to have healthcare. If you're retiring, you're going to have to think through your healthcare insurance, because if you were retiring before Medicare years, you're going to have COBRA for 18 months, and then you've got the Affordable Care Act that you're going to either have to jump on or something like that. Different people are using, Christian MediShare, other options out there that are being used, but you've got to find what works for you. With that, though, that kind of goes back to the tax planning, because if you make too much money, even if it's on conversions and different things, you got to be careful, because it could bump up your adjusted gross income, which is then going to increase your affordable care. So it's not going to be, it's going to become unaffordable care. So it's all based on your incomes there. And then you got to think through, long term, maybe there's asset protection. You got large brokerage accounts. Do you have an umbrella policy? Are you really making sure that your assets are protected if you've built that large nest egg that you're hoping for? Other than that, you've got long-term care insurance that you've got to factor in. Is it something that you're going to self-fund? Is it something you're going to consider? I'm not a big proponent of it, only because I worked in that world and I did see, first of all, a lot of people are having to, fight for actually getting the care. There's certain stipulations you have to meet in order to get the insurance companies to pay out. Also, they're built a lot like an auto insurance policy. So you don't wreck the car, you still have to pay in, and eventually they can raise the premiums just because, or because other people are actually, wrecking their cars. More people are going to the nursing homes. You're going to have to pay a higher rate there. So it's something to think through. I'm not saying don't get the long-term care. It's something to look at, consider, look at your plan. I mean, with us, we run plans where we actually build in national averages of in-home care, nursing home care, things like that, to stress test. And you've got to consider your family history. I mean, family history is a big thought on that, because, if everybody in your family has dementia and ends up going into a nursing home, or, if you're a single person and you don't have any kids, what does this look like for you? So it's definitely something to consider.
For the younger crowd out there, when I get a lot of this, the term life insurance thing, how do you pick that number, the level of coverage you want? Well, that requires more than just having a salesman say, well, pick the 500,000 or whatever. No, go back and think, like, who are you supporting here? Like, why is it 500? If you already have a sizable, like, investment portfolio or something, can that not work for them? Like, so even though it's really cheap, and especially if you're younger, let's think through, like, why are you picking that amount first, and what is it supposed to go towards? The clients the other day, 2 kids, college fully funded, and he had, for his age, I was impressed. You see so many clients. And he's like, I want to get $1 million policy. I'm like, yeah, okay. Why? What are we doing with this $1 million? You've already got all these millions. What are you going to do? And he just had it in his head that he wanted that policy. And I'm like, well, everything has a number. Let's figure out why you want that first. So from the asset protection side of things, I get it, but don't overpay for something.
Yeah. Don't. Why do you have it if you don't need it? On the other side of that, the younger people they're watching that have the kids and haven't gotten anything yet and have a spouse, you really should start thinking through it.
And if you're really young, the disability insurance. I mean, it's super cheap to like cover a half to 3/4 of your income. I've done that a little bit, shopped around. Chris has helped out with that. It's like you gotta Like you look at that and you think, well, no, I'll protect my income, especially if you have more of a physical job.
Yep. Long-term disability insurance.
Yeah, people don't look at, you hear it and you think, oh, I don't want to spend money on something. Look up some pricing. You'd be surprised. It's not, and we don't sell that or anything, but it's just not that expensive.
Yep.
What else you got, sir?
And then we got before we go into the
goals.
questions there, the goals. So really just factoring in your goals in retirement and what those are. So many people have different things that they want to think through. Maybe it's having the mortgage paid off before you retire, or when you hit 60. That's okay. It doesn't have to be done though. Depends on the plan and what your goals are. Are you helping your kids with college? Is that something that you're wanting to factor in as well? Or, even one really that, people talk about, I see is some people want to help their kids. Other people aren't really planning to help their kids, and it's like, hey, they're whatever's left, they're going to get. And you've got to start considering though, if you were to get approached by a child, because we've had these scenarios come into play where one of the children just says, hey, you know what, I really could use $50,000. I've kind of got myself into a pickle here. Maybe something happened. Can you afford to do that? Do you want to do that? What does that look like? Things like that. You really almost want to draw a hard line in the sand and say, hey, if something were to come up and I were to have my child come to me to do this, I want to build this in the plan just as like what if. Can I afford to give them 10 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand? Like, what does that look like? That's just an idea. You've also got, just your general goals. We always talk about go, slow go, no go years, your vacationing years, building that in, building in the roof for later on, because you're eventually going to need a roof if you own a home. You're eventually going to need an air conditioner if you own a home. Things like that oftentimes aren't always built into the plan that you want to think through there.
Part of my pet peeve, if you're a client, by the way, I'm going to go there again.
Oh, here we go.
One of my pet peeves, and maybe you just don't know, but when you're in NestEgg and you're filling out the goals section, right? Just simply putting, I'm going to spend $6,000 a month for the rest of my life. Okay, well, we'll factor in inflation. We'll work on all that. But you have so many things throughout life that will need to be changed. Like you mentioned, the roof needs to get replaced if you're going to stay in your house. Is the goal to relocate to a smaller, bigger, second house, whatever. Itemizing some of those bigger goals really helpful. A new car every 5 years for whatever you spend on a car. So really overdo it in that goals section, and then we can always come back and go, well, we're already accounting for it here or whatever, and strip it down. Travel is a big one.
Oh yeah. Yep. All right, so we got a couple questions too. So I'm going to go with these real quick, and we'll talk through those. Should a person factor in buying long-term care insurance in their NestEgg plan? Which is NestEgg is the software we use for planning. Some people may not have NestEgg; they may use something else. But should they factor that in or rely on the value of their home to finance long-term care?
Totally individual. You just said it a second ago, where it was like, do you have the ability to self-fund potential long-term care? Have we determined that there's longevity in your family to do that? How old are you now, right? Because since COVID, I believe it's not as easy to get long-term care if you're a certain age. So if you're really young and starting to consider that because you watch your grandparents and great-grandparents maybe still alive, that's something.
Are you single? I mean, I personally wouldn't, you and your spouse are both the same age. You're both 70 years old or 60 years old and you're considering it. What happens if, you say, well, you know what, we're just going to sell the house off. Well, then what happens if the other spouse is healthy? You're in a pickle there because you don't have the roof over your head. Also, a lot of times, so what people don't realize is, you can have a certain amount of income coming in. You can have a certain amount of assets. It's very, very limited and depends on the state. And you can oftentimes have a primary residence, maybe even one vehicle. And that is allowed in order for you to qualify for Medicaid, Medi-Cal, depending on what state you're in. It's called something different. It's not something that you want to be in that position. But if you're a single person, I've talked to a lot of people that are like, you know what, if I spend out my assets and the government steps in, okay.
It's not going to be pretty.
At that point, I'm potentially out of my mind anyways. On the same side of that, if let's just say that you're looking and you're saying, well, hey, I want to cash out of my house to do it, that's an option for you. But if you can keep the house and maybe it goes to the beneficiaries and Medicaid or Medi-Cal or something still steps in, that's an option too. It's something that, if this is something that runs in your family, talking to an estate planning attorney that, is going to really talk through that with you may be a good idea. And it's all going to vary depending on your scenario, like you had mentioned.
No problems here, man. My family, we live hard and die young.
Yeah. And I think too, do you have kids? But are your kids local or
The
not?
kids are the ones that kill us.
Yeah. Oh, man, I got some gray hairs because of that. Yeah, I feel you. All right, second question here is, my son turned 18 this year. He has a Roth IRA. He's had a Roth since he was 13 under my account. What happens now? I have some questions on this, but I'll let you see what your thoughts are.
I'm not entirely sure that we're using the right terminology there. So
I'm hoping that he's meaning that it's not in his name. Oh, I created a Roth IRA, but it's for my kid. I'm hoping it's a juvenile Roth IRA that he is now, like, he's the custodian of, and then once they turn, a certain age, they get it. But if so, I really hope also that he has a business, or she has a business, because if you've been putting money in a Roth IRA for your child and they don't have working income, technically they can't do that.
Well, I think so.
There's a lot of questions there.
Yeah, is it? I'm almost thinking the kid was 13. Was it a custodial account?
And not a Roth.
Yeah, because he's saying what happens now. So now the kid's reached of age, and there's only a couple states where you got to wait till you're 21. I think New York's one of them. But
Oregon.
Just
went through that. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So the kid, let's say the kid's 18 and able to take over. He's saying what happens now. That makes me think it's a custodial account that's in his name, and now he wants to like push it to him.
Could be. So whether it's a custodial or it's a juvenile Roth, either way, because the juvenile Roth, if it is that and it's theirs, but they just haven't taken ownership of it directly yet. What you'll have there is, just as Dustin mentioned, depends on the state that you live in. Oftentimes it's between 18 and 21 that they reach the age of majority, where they're allowed to then take over that account. You're able to pass it to them. Something I would check with whoever the custodian is of that account should probably be able to help you. We use Goldman here for assets, and with all of the custodial accounts, we contact them, and they're the ones who really direct that and say, hey, okay, yeah, we can create a new account. It's going to go to the child now, or nope, they got to wait until, let's say, 21 years old to figure that out.
What if it was a Roth at the age of 13 and the kid didn't have a job for the first 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, that's my concern.
I
saw that, and I was like, oh man, I really hope, because people want to set up the Roth IRA for the child, and if you do that, they have to have working income. They can do a juvenile Roth IRA, but you have to have 1099 or W-2 income, and even to that, if they make $2,000 a year, they can only do $2,000 in the Roth. They can't do the full, $7,000 max for 2024.
Is that a client?
No, I'm just.
No, that person.
No, this was a question from YouTube.
I was going to say I thought of a secret. I thought of a way to get around it, but I'd be giving advice. I can't say it because it's.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking, if you don't get audited, it's.
Nope. No, I'm saying I know how you make it disappear, but stay in a Roth, and then that way, if they come back and look at that Roth, it's empty. It's gone. It's been gone. Closed it. I just had a genius idea.
Okay.
But I can't. I don't want to. Yeah, because then somebody's going to do it.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those that if you do get caught, then
I'm not saying it's illegal. I'm just saying I thought of the workaround there. So.
Yeah, I like it. See, that's what you get when you're here with Jazz. Maybe we'll have that conversation with you. All right. So a priest, a monk, and a rabbit walk into a clinic to donate blood. The rabbit says, "I think I might be a typo."
All right. Yeah, you got a smile out of me.
It's a little better. I threw away your joke book.
Well,
I
you
appreciate
threw it
it.
away?
I didn't throw it away. No, it's there. But I just went back to a different platform so that I could try to find some today.
All right.
I had to get you something.
You want another one?
No, I don't.
Oh,
I don't.
come on.